Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're looking at Beyond Eyes. So I just played a game called Home is Where One Begins, which was a walking simulator, and about a girl, well, a narrator remembering the time when she was a girl, when she missed the bus, and then wandered around her house area. This is a story about a girl who I believe is blind, or becomes blind, and we experience kind of the world through sound. So yeah, it looks like fireworks somehow exploded directly into her eyes, which that could happen certainly, but that's not gonna happen if it's high in the sky. So you kind of have a different experience here. Doesn't seem like they're narrating anything. It seems like it's just going to be sound effects and just trying to use that as its own thing. Now, this was I believe, a 2015 game released by a developer who hasn't made anything else, according. So see how the cat just like appeared when it made sound. It's strange that you wouldn't have a staff of any sort. Like, even if you don't know how to use a staff because you're recently blinded, you would be given a staff and told to start using it just to swoop it back and forth so you don't crash into walls. Being left all alone, in general, as a blind person outside is probably not acceptable. And sure, it can take a while to get a seeing eye dog type creature or assistive pet, and I think a lot of times it just takes longer and longer for kids. Kids with special disabilities often will not get the things that they need fast enough. Like if they're missing arms, they won't get a prosthetic arm because insurance will just go, oh, they'll just grow out of it, or they'll get one and then they'll grow out of it and not get an adjustment. So there are a few games where you play as a blind person. Let's see. Let's go ahead and hit the buttons and see what this is. There seem to be no options to start with, so let's go ahead and adjust some things here. I'm not hearing any music. I'm not going to bother to turn the VSync off. It's WASD. I think we could probably turn everything up just a little bit since that's going to be a big focus. There is actual chapters in this game compared to the walking simulator. There's actual animation here. This game was published by Team 17, who originally were known for being the publishers of the Worms games, Worms World Party and things like that. So apparently you get just a kind of colorful depiction of what the world, what you think it is compared to your memory. But there seems to be no button or interaction buttons at the moment. Team 17 would have been in their early positions of as acting as a third-party publisher, whereas now I would say, even though they are somewhat known for the escapist games, they're probably most known now as just a publisher. This is interesting, but I could see how this would get very boring very fast. Like, there's not going to be a run button, you can probably tell. A lot of the games that we have seen in the past, that I've seen and not actually even played, that involve blind people, tend to have this focus on being horror games by removing one sight and focusing on the horror of not being able to see, which there's something to that idea. She can't step up, so even this small bump up is a major improvement. At a certain level, this could also be considered insulting because you're trying to tell the experience of someone who's blind, and instead of even slightly trying to depict it, you have made a gameplay mechanic that is 100% around the idea of subverting that disability and just saying, oh, well, you can just get close to things and then you have a full, like, 100% perspective of the world. Of course, this is also what she thinks she's seeing, and questionable how she would know that a trellis is there or not. The pair quickly became best friends. Yeah, most of the horror games try to be more of an echolocation type experience, and then they're not very pretty to look at. I feel like the blob mentality is probably close to like an accurate perspective here. There is definitely a danger here that this is just going to turn into an extremely linear game at this point. She needs to gain some ability. Summer gave away the autumn. Ray's friend now had a name. So everything we've seen up until this point now apparently is going to change. That being said, I think her outfit has stayed the same.
Nani?
Yeah. Having the blind person make more noise makes a lot of sense. Because just because they're blind doesn't mean that they would be quiet. If anything, they're going to be
Nani?
fairly noisy. You are in this dangerous situation here where this is just going to turn into...
Nani?
Ray missed Nani on the days he didn't visit, but he would always show up eventually. And there's a woodpecker. This probably would be kind of a great idea as far as a concept of a game. Not for a player, but for a developer who really just needs to be able to figure out, can they animate? Can you animate in this kind of pastel, almost like book style of animation? This is not a bad style of animation. It wouldn't hurt to see a few more games slightly drawn like this. Particularly if you started to see a lot of mobile games animated like this and getting more away from the just kind of generic standard fantasy style of animation. And certainly there's plenty of games that are so heavily focused by Asian animation styles that they become generic in their lack of variety. Winter came, Nani started to visit less often. So now that it's winter and there's snow, that really throws a loop around the idea of her wearing just rubber boots. But much like the walking simulator Home is Where One Starts, this feels like it is dangerously close to that exact same experience, with the problem being that this was made in Unity, which would have it run a little bit better, I imagine, on mobile phones, but it doesn't have that default Unreal Engine ability to pick up objects. This also does not look like an asset flip, like where, like the walking simulator home is where one starts, because in this instance, I think everything we're looking at has been at least given a level of polish to look similar to the same things we've already seen. That's like a frozen lake. And see, I just really don't know how long this game really is. And I don't know how long a game like this really could be.
Nani?
There could be a very ironic twist where a lot of the things we see are not the way we perceive them. So that she hears a cat and really it's just some other kind of animal like a raccoon or something. Yeah, either this blind girl has no caregivers, which is possible. That is a problem with every story involving a child, though. Is almost always it is that the parents are negligent at some level, and that certainly would explain her blindness too. Although, honestly, if you were looking up at a firework and it went off in the sky and it dropped fire,
Nani?
bits of firework in your eyes, sparkles and flares, I'd call that more of a fluke accident than negligence. You'd have to be a fairly cautious parent to tell them they have to wear safety glasses to look at fireworks. Now, if it were a case that she was playing with sparklers or bottle rockets or M80s or something, and she was playing with kids and the kids accidentally blew it up in her face. This is not frozen lake, is it? It's just a stone fountain. Then that would have been a different story. There's also no looking up, oddly. So you can look down and zoom the camera out quite a bit, but you can't really look up.
Nani?
It almost feels like if you wanted to make a game of this, you should have almost like a Telltale style prompt where it says, I hear a sound on some new kind of surface I'm walking on. What is this? And then you'd select grass or tile or like rocks, and then that might directly affect how things looked. Each time Nani left the garden, Ray would worry, wondering if he would ever come back.
Nani?
Nani also sounds like this is a sounds like this might be like a Asian, maybe Korean name of a cat. Let's see. I know in Japanese they say cats say the word nya, but I don't actually know what the exact Japanese word for a cat is. But yeah, there is a spring brought the garden back to life, but Nani was nowhere to be found. And see, it looked like her dress did take a shade of green for a moment there. And it does look like there's just going to be things you can't see. I mean, honestly, I guess the idea is that she was allowed to just wander freely in this garden, but this garden's not safe at all. There's far too many tripping hazards, far too many potential places where you could fall down and bust your face. And unlike a regular child where falling down and busting your face open might be a painful situation, she would have a hard time finding her way back home. So there's like an interaction button here. And I hit the A button and it interacted. Ray missed her friend badly. One day she decided to go and find him. Which is just pure insanity. Like, because they're basically saying the cat's been missing for an entire season and she's just gonna wander around looking for it. That's never gonna work. But I won't complain about child logic for a child character. And then that just resets the whole thing. Well, for what was probably one chapter, I walked slower, I got less narration, and I got somehow, at best, the similar amount of story that I got from the walking simulator. Home is where one starts. Which, that's really not a good comparison to end up having, because I felt like that game really was not polished enough, and that's really leaving this as being visually something, but storyline nothing. And if you've already got these small environments, I'm gonna clearly just need to walk as forward as fast as possible, because this is gonna be way too slow otherwise. Could you do something different with this? Could you put a adventure element? Could you have some items that need to be picked up and found, some collectibles? Give me an achievement to seek out. There's animals here and sounds. So if the game was going to be just walk around and listen for sounds, that would be interesting. That being said, what's that supposed to be? Ray wondered if Nani might have come this way. What is that supposed to be? It looks like a place specifically designed where you could jump over a gate. What are you keeping in and what are you keeping out with that? Like, what animal possibly would be stopped by a gate this short that has a step like that? Maybe a cow or something. Maybe you're not stopping anybody. Maybe it's just decorative. I feel like we're gonna kind of quickly end up not actually walking to where in a area, and more just walking in the mind's eye of the main character. There's another game that sort of looked like this, and you do tend to run into this problem where it looks like game developers basically steal each other's ideas. There was a game. Things were not always as she imagined them. There you go. So here's the first bit of twist 20 minutes into the game, that it's not a fountain of running water. It's a sewer pipe. Or runoff pipe. Probably water runoff, not sewage. And I'm sure that might come into play, but how much it comes into play, who knows? Does that mean at some point she's going to get completely tricked and hurt herself or die? Or does it mean she's just going to be surprised whimsically every now and then. And if there was supposed to be an achievement for coloring in the entire world, they should have given me like an introductory, you've done 1% of the world. Actually, it was only about a year ago, as of this recording, that another game came out where you were going to spray paint the world and try to bring color back to a world, which you're kind of doing here. So she got spooked by a crow, which apparently the crows spook her, so you have to get away from the crows. Well, at least that's some gameplay. And so, yeah, there's the clothes hanging in, or actually a scarecrow. Well, while I would say the crows are kind of pains in the butt, I wouldn't really call them much of a danger. Interesting to see that the whole world is darker now. And maybe this is a metaphor for growing up a little bit. But it also then makes the argument that they may not really care about you filling in the entire world. There is a level at which you can't get any closer. She'll just stop. So we really didn't look all the way over there, but I don't know if it really matters to look all the way over here. Of course, the real danger here is very few animals, big animals, are going to make much of a sound at all. They're going to attack first. So this seems to be our standard transition to different areas. But she still seems afraid. She seems too old to really be afraid of crows and not know what the sound of crows are. And then she just transitions back to... Let's just, I guess, try and stay on the path. Like, there might be an achievement for speedrunning the game more than wandering around. There needs to be something that would fill in larger and larger areas, like a control tower of sort that you could capture for this idea. If the main gameplay mechanic really is the idea of coloring everything. But I guess it's probably not really what's going on here. I imagine we are simply just looking for the cat. There's no like 3D audio. Let's just take a moment to mention that. Like, I have headphones on, so if there was like a good stereophonic 3D audio going on right now, I should be able to recognize it, and I just am not recognizing that at all. So even though I hear the chirping of birds, I can't tell you if the chirping of birds are exactly 180 degrees behind where I am, or if they are, or if it is actually somewhere closer to. See, is it possible that you could miss something? Like, I hear a cow, and I assume I just heard the cow because I got close to it. Yeah. Cows are about the only thing that would be stopped by this kind of fence. But it then just disappears again. You could have a blind person's hidden object game type of experience. Like, create a whole new type of hidden object game, which frankly there's tons of hidden object games, so it wouldn't hurt if there was a sound version of that. Let's see, I don't know if I'm just missing large swaths as I'm trying to walk forward, or if this is just a case of the world gets white again when you walk around. Seems like they have dropped us in. They've dropped us in an area that is very open world. So, is it possible that we're going to just wander into the location where it's supposed to look for the cat and potentially miss a lot of the other locations? Or are there just a bunch of areas that you can find where there's a bunch of creatures? Seems like I can let the chickens out. Am I letting the chickens out, or am I opening the door and going in with the chickens? She seems to not really have any interest in the chickens, and I'm gonna tap the A button as I get near them to see if I could possibly pick them up. Let's see if we can convince them all to leave. Out you go. There's one. They have kind of like randomized paths that take them away from wherever you are. There's almost two. Well, I don't know if I have a real reason to let the chickens out, but we'll leave them to be free. Chickens are mostly kept in a coop to keep them safe from themselves. See, and these little sit spots would have been the perfect Assassin's Creed style towers to have a place where you would sit and potentially find, like hear an entire area and have a large swoop of an area.
Nani?
All she's gonna ever say is Nani, which I guess is easy on the translation. I suppose there are countries out there where you might let an average child wander around in a beautiful countryside. Of course, if the dog is barking, that means that he's behind something, because if the dog wasn't barking, he would totally be running towards you, either to be petted or to bite you. This really does feel like a lovely area, and yeah, a lot of it is just getting reused as assets, although I can't really call any of this asset flips on its own, because it's just frankly too, what would be the best word for it, too customized in the art style. Running into something, which seems odd. And it does seem like we are now in much more of an open world section, where it is only going to make sense to try and mark off as much of the area as possible. So, well, but I'm really not sure there's any more game here. I was shocked when I looked on Wikipedia and saw that this game was reviewed fairly low at about a 5 out of 10, when an average game is given usually a 7.5 out of 10, regardless of whether it realistically should be given that high of a score or not. So it does feel like this is the type of game that simply will not land well for a lot of people, and I could definitely see why. Like, if this is just a game that is stretching for time. This little villa is questionable, I would say, also, in that there seems to be no roads that actually access other paths. It seems like there's just almost like a commune of houses that have dirt paths, and they just interconnect with each other, and they don't interconnect. Must have triggered something. I think the story here is either the cat's gonna be dead, or the cat is just really, really well treated amongst many, many people. I guess you have this weird side effect that if there is something very far in the distance that you've seen, you'll have memories of that, and you'll be able to see that, and which really gives this girl very large spatial orientation. But if they are gonna at some point tell me to go to where the cow is and take a left, that's still gonna be fairly difficult. I've played a few games that are actually designed for blind people to play, and there's no graphics in them at all. There are slightly interesting ideas, certainly. There's a lot of struggle there. I'd say the video game industry is barely starting to even care about colorblind people, let alone actually blind people. I've seen Pokemon being just coincidentally a fairly good game for blind people to play. Questionable about how far they've actually can get in the game, but each Pokemon does have a different cry, so if you can get into the Pokedex by sound alone, you can at least hear the different cries. Of course, the irony there is that blind people would never know just the massive amount of text that is in that RPG of Pokemon. Alright, we're seeing a huge wall that is scaring her, I think. Which, from the sounds of it, that sounds like a road. And there's kind of no way that she's gonna find a cat if it got ran over. And it seems like she was guided to this point where there was this bell, but the bell seems to be not really connected to a church or anything. So it's just a weird bell that I guess maybe is automatic and connected to a clock. Yeah, this does kind of just dangerously get to the point of fantasy where we're gonna have a blind character somehow figure out how to cross a road without a cross stop. I could see definitely a character though going blind, and after having to deal with all of that, perhaps reverting to a more childlike mentality and state and just not being super capable. If this was to be like a 12-year-old child, for instance, I could see her reverting after being blinded.
Ah.
Here we go, that's what we needed. We needed to find the stop and hope it plays some music when it lets you. Problem here is you walk so crazy slow that she may have not made it all the way. And cars would be about the noisiest thing in the game. So there should have been a lot more noise there. Otherwise it would have just been an empty street. I feel like there should just be more story to this, and this would just be almost like a visual novel, interactive tale. Instead of the walking part, because the walking's not really adding anything to the experience here. We are now somewhere, and we kind of don't know where that somewhere is. And of course you're not going to be able to read any of this. So they're just going to put a black wall here, and that's going to be the marker of this new area. And see, they were trying to give us some story, but yeah, if you get over the basic question about how does she know that there's some writing on some of the signs, why is she not feeling any of the signs for Braille? Probably because she can't read Braille. How does she know the color of some of the flowers? Like, it's one thing to think there are flowers or imagine there are flowers. It's another thing to know what color they are. Although, again, this clearly is just what she imagined. And that would be the funny twist if it turned out she was like in a monstrous world and everything we saw is something completely different. There is a game, I'm not sure if it's come out yet, called like The Blind Prince and the Liar Princess or something along that line as the name, and the Liar Princess in the title there Ray had never been this far from home, but she imagined Nani would have come here. The Liar Princess in that title is like a monster. And the monster just has taken a liking to the blind prince and is walking him around a world while the monster is still doing things. Yeah, it seems like we've ended up in a zoo. Like, which, taking a blind kid to a zoo is not a bad idea. It's just, you wouldn't want to leave them alone at a zoo. She's gonna end up in the monkey cages at this rate. Either this is a zoo or this is a just really fancy neighborhood with a lot of iron fences now. Feels like a lot of this stuff could also have been stuff you could bump into and knock over. And then there'd be like an interesting mini game. So there's a car. Is it really a car or is it an animal or a generator? So she was startled by a lawnmower. Okay. But I don't know what the big reveal about that is. Like, at a certain point, the character is going to go from being a sympathetic character because she's blind into just a character that I can't relate to at all because she's just kind of stupid. If she's going to be so horribly negatively affected simply because she misinterpreted the sound of a lawnmower to the sound of a broken down car, neither one of those are inherent threats to a kid, nor was the ravens an inherent threat to a kid. Like, at a certain point, you have to make the argument that this character is agoraphobic and blind and just afraid of the outside world in totality. The music comes in and then it goes away. And man, you can just walk up against a fence in some places and it fills in a huge amount of the area. Once again, if this dog is capable of reaching you and it's not on a leash or something, it would have run up and reached you a long time ago. I've never seen a dog be shy of a little kid. Unless it was just really well trained. And I guess you could have a really well trained dog that just barks at things and doesn't go up to kids. We have a situation here also where we may run into just a lot of repeated elements. A lot of chickens, a lot of dogs, a lot of birds. So she's imagining the cat is scratching on the tree. Instead it was rats scratching at a door with some creepy masks. If this was to turn into a horror game, that would be something. Yeah, that would be a more interesting story to me personally, is if all of a sudden it turned into her imagination is just going wild and everything is just taking upon itself a creepier appearance, and she's just forgetting what the real world actually looks like. There was a game called, I believe it was Caden, Cadyne, or something like that. It was kind of a demo prequel to a game called Stasis, where this woman gets abducted by aliens, or she's having a dream after having a procedure while being pregnant, and so you kind of don't know if her experience is real or if it's just happening in her head. You don't see that too much in video games. They tend to come out straight and just say, yes, what is happening is real. And there's no blocking me here, it's just invisible wall. So this whole section seems to have been extra. Alright, so let's see something. Chapters, prologue, chapter 1, chapter 3. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. We could be in chapter 3 right now, and there could be only 3 chapters. We could be in chapter 1, and there's 3 chapters. We could be in the prologue, and there's 3 chapters. Since we didn't get any title cards telling us that we were in chapter 1 or 2 or 3. Something more this way, possibly. There is a danger here. We're just gonna get really, really far from where we're supposed to be. There's a gate here, but it seems like we can't open the gate. Is that because we've missed something elsewise, or is this now just a game where you have to get a certain amount of the world revealed? So it seems like we were supposed to trigger that. It seems like the dog is just chasing. She's just walking after bells after bells. Getting further and further away from home. And none of the adults that seem to be in the general vicinity seem to care. Although, in all fairness, if they didn't know she was blind, per se, they probably wouldn't care too much. It seems like it's a fairly quiet villa. She gonna end up at school? Oh no, bad ending. You ended up going to school. Although, in all fairness, I think the prologue kind of indicated she probably would have liked to play with the kids more. But maybe they kind of rejected her. That either could be true. There is an argument definitely for getting back to something like normality. So we have now a secondary child character. So maybe she's gonna forget about the cat and make a new friend. Lily had lost her ball and needed Ray's help.
On there.
Interesting.
On there.
She's pointing. But how do we get over?
That way.
They have kind of like a Simlish language.
On there.
But I can't press A and just jump.
On there.
So you're going to have kind of a repeated annoying sound effect for a while.
That way.
Which, seriously, they needed a run button. Like, am I seriously supposed to be running into a dog and having to walk around? Just shoot a dog. So that leaves you with the thought that you have to go like really far back. They're really stretching it at this point. This is an unreasonable amount of distance to do a simple action as fetching a ball. And this is starting to get a little finger blistering, a little thumb blistering on the controller, because you're just pressing forward non-stop. Yeah, much like the walking simulator, there's not a lot of gameplay here, so it's hard to hit that level of saying I like this game or I like what's going on here, because you can't really make that argument ever, because there's basically nothing happening. See, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking at. I guess that was a memory where the cat was. But is getting the memories of where the cat was helping anything? Really? Or is it like progressing the story, or is it just that you go through this experience, you experience what you experience, and whatever you miss, and that's the end of the game? It almost feels like there probably are some kind of achievements somewhere in the game, and that's why there are chapters. But that also feels like that's the only reason why there might be chapters. If we came down this path and the dog got distracted when somebody whistled, so let me just hit all the buttons and see if maybe she would start whistling. Although if she did start whistling, the dog would probably just come to where she is and not. So, got a sprinkler head. As a sound effect. No pun intended. It does kind of feel like they just totally dropped the ball here as far as an idea of having a bunch of anchor points for a blind person to find where they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to go. Like, There's just not enough sound effects. This is kind of a funny trick. I could imagine if you were playing something like The Witcher 3, like a big AAA game, you could have a section where a character gets blinded by a like flashbang or something, and then you have to walk around a level for about 20 minutes like this. But that's probably the maximum amount of entertainment you're going to get from something like that, and then you're done. Like, now nearly an hour in, we're in a very weird position. Am I supposed to walk all the way back this way? To major sections that we've already kind of been through? Because I kind of know I did miss something like way to the left of that area. But the idea that that is the thing that I was supposed to use it to find a way past the dog is fairly unbelievable. I recently played a game called Valley where it sold itself on the concept that you were running around the valley and you had the ability to suck or restore the life of plants and a limited number of animals, really, in the world you were in. They really failed to do anything with it. This feels somewhat similar in that style. It feels like as you're walking by each of these sections, you're potentially bringing life back to a world that has been destroyed. Of course, I've also wanted to always see a game where you could just have a 100% destructible environment, and thus the whole world would just fade to white like it is now. There still are things you can just bump into because they don't make any sound. I feel like even if I was to triple the volume, there still would be only so many samples of sound files being played at the same time. Most games do not have a problem with that, and haven't had a problem with that in probably 30 years. But back in the day, there was certainly sound cards that could only play like 16, 24 sound samples at the same time. So music could play in like a background channel, and you could get one gunshot and one enemy, and then that was pretty much it. Of course, at the same time, that would have been a limitation because of the sound cards. There would have been limitations on hard drive space as far as how many sound files you could really have, or MIDI sounds.
Oh, there.
So here's what my guess is. I am supposed to
That way.
not listen to her and try
On there.
to jump over.
On there.
I think I'm supposed to possibly just walk this way and show her that I'm blind. Or
Oh, there.
perhaps I simply just didn't go far enough in this direction.
That way.
Am I gonna run into a wall?
Oh, there.
So
Oh,
we
there.
kind of assume this is a school, and the girl's not just trapped
On there.
in some kind of mansion or something.
Oh, there.
But yeah, it does feel like there should be just blades of grass blowing in the wind all over the place. It should be a fairly noisy experience, much like being in the forest would be a fairly noisy experience. Can I sneak by it? See, I don't know if I've now resolved to a point where I can actually get the ball, or if I've just resolved to walk away from her and not help her. Like, what are we standing on? Are we standing on stone, or are we standing on ice? It seems like this is a playground. A fairly broken down playground. But then again, that might also be in our mind, so I wouldn't be surprised if this actually isn't a playground at all, and this is like some kind of industrial manufacturing plant. Pretty much if we find this cat, it's going to just be randomness. And it's been an hour. Was that her talking?
On there.
So I don't know if there's another hour of gameplay in this, or if we're
On there.
near the end. Alright, you get the ball, and now what? Because you can't reach the person. So do we have the ability just to throw the ball? Because theoretically you would never be able to see it if you were playing actually as the blind character, instead of as a third-person camera perspective of the blind character. There's a lot of little ponds used to act as natural barriers. Yeah, this does feel like kind of a tech demo designed to allow them to test their skills or train themselves in 3D animation and natural level generation, so it doesn't feel too crazy. Like this pathway that has bricks on both sides, which are not making any sounds, so there'd be no way she knows they're that way. That seems fairly unnatural, that there would be a pathway like that. And you have to just constantly walk until you find a wall. It's effectively like a maze game where you're just walking through a maze, put one hand on the wall and never take it off, and eventually you'll make it all the way to the exit. Which, yeah, if that was what this was and that was the secret reveal, that'd be interesting a little bit, but not the hours worth of effort I've put into the game so far worth. There is just a certain level to mention here of a lot of walking around. And it seems like whether you're a AAA game developer or a indie developer, now Ray needed help. Could Lily help her find Nani?
Kitty? That way? I know. Ray, go.
the odds of them talking about the same cat are astronomically high. Like, any villa would be overrun by stray cats. Every city is overrun by them. So he's backing away now. See, this would be funny if this is the end of the game and it just knocks her like off the ledge. She has no idea where she's going, and she can only take a few steps back, and then it kind of stops. Finally, she tries to shoot him. No, she just fell over. And then absolutely nothing happens. And then you're out of that section. Wow. So that's the level of your boss fight in this game. Now we're walking on bricks, which could mean anything. And so are we now in Act 3, or are we approaching the end? Let's see. Chapters now. Chapter 4. Okay. So then all indication is that there is probably at least 9 chapters with a prologue in this. So there is probably at least 3 hours of gameplay in this, although I have to use the definition of gameplay extremely loosely. This is one of those games where I probably spent more money than it was worth. I was definitely highly motivated to want to play this game based on the looks of it. It definitely does sell on a interesting kind of pastel watercolor, not even so much pastel, just watercolor art style. But yeah, I'm not seeing a real game here, and I would have much preferred this to be either a horror or a platformer or a hidden object game or an adventure game, anything at all. Just even a visual novel, frankly, if they just wanted to tell me a story. I feel like there should have been a lot more dialogue written, whether you're going to make me read it or whether you're going to voice it out loud. And there should be a better motivating factor than just finding a cat, because that's not going to play for people that hate cats or people that aren't super cat fans. And I don't know if it even plays for people that are cat fans, that you would want to spend potentially 3 hours in a game looking for a cat that almost certainly has either moved on or died if they've been missing for an entire season. Anyways, that's going to be where I end this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.